welcome back to the Dan Corder Show. As you know already, South Africa is a movie. This is The Watch Party. Now, late last week, a court case by a 23-member group was opened against a bunch of very powerful people. The sitting president of South Africa, the police minister, the justice minister, the national director of public prosecutions, the NPA. It's a huge case that is trying to force the government to open inquiries into apartheid crimes that were committed that did not get amnesty from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And one of the members who have put forward this case is here with us tonight. So let's talk about it. I am genuinely thrilled and moved to be able to say that renowned author, journalist, and activist who is deeply involved in this case in the pursuit of justice, Lukhanyo Calata, is here. Lukhanyo, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
How does it feel to have taken everyone powerful to court?
Not nice.
Yeah.
Not nice because I shouldn't have to do this, or we as the families, we shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to ask the president and his minister of justice, his minister of police. We shouldn't have to ask anybody to do their jobs, particularly when their job specs had already been outlined to them by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
So for those of you who don't know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, part of their job was to grant amnesty or not grant amnesty on certain cases of people who committed crimes during apartheid. And at the end of the TRC process, a bunch of court cases were, or at least the NPA was given the instruction to pursue investigations into a bunch of these crimes. And over 20 years later, many of those cases have not seen any movement whatsoever. And there's been mudslinging in our politics about whose fault that is. Vusi Pikoli said a little while ago that Thabo Mbeki's government, amongst others, had been politically meddling to protect apartheid perpetrators. And Mbeki said that's not true. The problem was in the NPA. The long and the short of it is 2 years later, there hasn't been any movement. And now, Lukhanyo, I'd like you to describe the case that you in particular have a personal connection to that is a very famous or infamous case from the mid-1980s.
My dad's case?
Yes.
All right. So my father was Fort Calata. He was assassinated by the apartheid government alongside Matthew Goniwe, Sparo Mkhonto, and Sicelo Mhlawuli. They were murdered while coming back from Port Elizabeth, today known as Gqeberha, by agents of the security forces. And the reason why they killed the Cradock Four was because my dad and his comrades had led the only successful revolution in the country, because by January 1985, the community of Lingelihle in Cradock, where I come from, they started governing themselves. They were governing because for about a year and a half prior to that, they had been involved in daily skirmishes with the police. So for 6 months between January 1985 and June 1985, my people in Cradock, they were governing themselves. So as a response, the apartheid government, killed them in as brutal a manner that as they could, basically to send a message, not just to the rest of the comrades in Lingelihle, but also, I suppose, to the rest of the black people in the country, to say that if you think that you can trifle with us, if you think that you can come and take our power, we will kill you. Not just kill you, but we will do it in the most brutal and possible way that we can, and we will make sure that we get away with it. And that's what they've done.
Yeah, because they initially denied that they had killed the Cradock Four, and then there was a leaked internal apartheid state security communique, essentially showing that they had ordered the hit that came out later. So how did this unfold in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission such that there was no amnesty granted in this case?
So when Eric Taylor and Saki van Zyl, Gerard Lotz, and all of the others, about 6 of them, when they applied for amnesty in 96, 97, they were denied amnesty because the Amnesty Commission basically said that they did not tell the entire truth around their murders and the roles that people played, within the government to murder the Cradock Four. As you'd mentioned, there was a military signal that came out in 92 actually leaked to General Bantu Olumisa. He then took that signal to former President Nelson Mandela, and the ANC was then able to use this document during the negotiations to say, but this is actual proof that you as the apartheid government had been running hit squads against us, because that military signal said or called for the permanent removal of my father, Fort Calata, his comrade Matthew Goniwe, and Matthew Goniwe's nephew, Mbulelo Goniwe. So that was actual proof that the government or the ANC had. So using that, F.W. de Klerk, who was president in '92, then called for a second inquest into the murders of the Cradock Four. That inquest, judgment was delivered on the 28th of May in 1994, just after President Mandela had taken office. And it was one of the first cases to actually, there be judgment of in the New South Africa. And it found that indeed my father and his comrades were murdered by agents of the apartheid state. It didn't name them, but it did say that, of course, the apartheid state was in essence responsible for their murders.
So then, I think it was in 2003, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission decided that about, I think it's 300 cases, there'd been no amnesty granted, and the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, would have to investigate these cases. Some of them were investigated, some of them were not, including your father's case, as well as, because you now have all together, I think 23 member family representatives brought. Is it 23 cases that have not been touched in the last 20 years?
Well, there's so much more.
No, I know, but just for your specific...
Yes. Yes, it's cases that of families that very much in positions like ours, where all the state had to do in some cases was just to investigate and then prosecute. In our case, they didn't even have to investigate. All they had to do was prosecute. Okay. But the state didn't. So now we've come together as these families who haven't seen justice and have been waiting for it for over 20 years now.
What have you been told over the last 20 years from the state about why there's been no movement?
Oh, nothing from the state. Absolutely nothing.
Grey ticked.
Yeah, completely.
Really, just ignoring emails.
Completely.
Really?
Yeah.
Excuses.
Look, so
even as like public spats have happened, like Vusi Pikoli and Thabo Mbeki. They
No.
just haven't.
No, so for instance, right, so Vusi Pikoli delivers an actual affidavit, I think in the Timol matter, it could be Timol or Similane, one of those, where he tells the court that the reason why he was unable to continue to prosecute these TRC cases was because of political interference. Now, who was the Minister of Justice at the time? I think it was Bridget Mabandla. Thabo Mbeki was president. Bulelani Ngcuka was director of the National Prosecuting Authority. So those individuals, at some point, they have to answer. But anyway, so he tells this to the court, Pikoli, he tells this to the court. President Thabo Mbeki does not go to court and deny it in court. Instead, he chooses to write letters. Now, I can say whatever I want in a letter because, you know what I mean, I can. But why doesn't he want to go to court or in front of a commission of inquiry where there's an actual risk of perjury for him to say that there was no interference or he didn't know of it? It's one thing to write Karen Moore a letter. It's another thing completely to go and say that in court.
Lots of people write Karen Moore letters. And then during the Zuma years and now the Ramaphosa years, much the same. Just ignoring and inaction.
Much the same, completely ignored. I don't even want to talk about the Jacob Zuma years because really, during the Jacob Zuma years, the docket, the original murder docket for the Cradock Four, case, disappeared inside the offices of the NPA. Wow. That happened in the Zuma years, right? Now, we're told that someone, Nomgcobo Jiba, right, who was acting in that position, that she had once asked for this docket or whatever the case was. The reality is that it disappeared under the Zuma years. Under President Cyril Ramaphosa, we've been writing letters, we've been asking to meet with him, we've been, and sometimes even if you just get a letter that says, hey, Lukhanyo, we acknowledge or receipt of this letter. You know, we don't even get an acknowledgement that we have actually asked, as the families of people who died, for us to have what we have in this country today, for me and you to sit here without the risk of either one of us going to jail, right? And the president just completely ignores us. But we understand, because when you think deeply about it, has the ANC ever taken a resolution to deal with TRC-related matters? None. I dare you, go back to any ANC elective or policy conference, go and read what they've, what the resolutions they've taken, and then come back to me and say, it was at this conference where they decided to do it. Because the ANC itself doesn't care, so why should the president of the ANC care?
And so this court case is now trying to compel the current powers that be to open investigations and inquiries.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is basically we want a commission of inquiry to investigate who the people were that in the state that actively interfered within the NPA and denied our fathers justice, right? So that's one. The other one is that we're asking for the court to grant us an amount of money. Out of that amount, we want money to be ring-fenced so that we, as just ordinary citizens and people that actually have got skin in this game, we can keep an eye on the NPA to make sure that the NPA actually delivers on its constitutional mandate to give people justice. Because there are some cases where some families still have hope of justice because there are still perpetrators that are alive in those cases.
Well, I really hope you win.
Thank you.
That's Lukhanyo Calata. Thank you so much.